Hello, this is Colleen with Designs of Value Art, and today we're going to continue with the beginners watercolor classes, and we're going to do techniques. And I have a Hahnemuhle paper here. It's 140 pounds. Now, as I was looking at this when I pulled it out the other day to use it for this class, it doesn't indicate that it's 100% cotton. But with this company's name, I would be absolutely shocked. They've been around forever. So we'll see. We're going to try it. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and I just sketched on a little leaf. Get this squared away here. So there we go. You can see what we're doing here. I sketched on 6 different leaves. Well, they're all the same leaf, but we're going to start right with water glazing. We're going to go wet on wet. Then we're going to jump down here to wet on dry, and I'll move it up so you'll be able to see it at that point. Then we're going to go into lifting colors. I kind of have these out of sequence here, and then charging color. And then next week, some of the more advanced techniques will be dry brushing, glazing color on top of your detail or your design that you've already painted, detailing your designs. I'm just looking to see damp brushing that goes right along with the detailing. How to use masking fluid, we'll go over. How to use your eradicator, we'll go over that. And just looking to see if there's anything here that I'm missing. It doesn't look like it, but what we're going to do today will take up quite a bit of time, and then next week will take up quite a bit of time as well. So we're going to get you through some of these techniques. And again, I am going to say you definitely need to practice these. Watching me do these will not teach you how to paint. Practicing what you see me do will teach you how to paint. Okay, so the most important one that we're going to be talking about today is water glazing. And what that means is you take clear water and you put it wherever you want to add color to your design. I have my watercolor paper. I have my design on my paper. I have a watercolor brush. And then I just have a number 4, and I'm going to use that for the painting portion. You're going to see me mix the colors and so forth, which is nice. And I always try to use a different color brush. This one happens to be a number 7 Rosemary & Co. It's got a nice point to it. So that I keep this clean. I don't put it in anything but water. And then my normal color brushes are either going to be red or green. And we'll get started. So I have my clear water. It's just a little jar. Tip it on the side so you can see it. And it's got a cap on it. I'm in the basement in my studio, so it's nice to have a cap on there that twists nice and tight. I'm just going to take that off. And then what I've done, I usually turn the cap over and put my jar right inside the cap, and it works pretty good. Holds it secure and I don't spill it. Okay, and then I've gone ahead and I've added Winsor & Newton's blending and glazing medium, and I like this because what it does is it gives you more time to play with the water that you put down. In other words, it doesn't dry as quickly as straight water would. So this one I really enjoy. Okay, so I'm just going to move my brushes out of the way here so I don't spill them or drop them or anything foolish. And I'm just loading my brush. And when I first started out, I always rolled the ferrule, which is the metal portion of your brush, over my hands. What that does is if there's any water drips on there, they get wiped off. And one of the most frustrating things in the world is if you already have color on your painting and you're going to add in more paint, but there's a water drip up here and it drips onto your project, you've probably just created a bloom that you didn't want. And so it can be very frustrating. So when you start out, just roll it right on your fingertips like that. It gets rid of all the little bubbles that can collect. And I always, on virgin paper, and this is paper that's never had anything applied to it, and that would be what this is, I always put 2 coats of water. Now, if this were a painted piece and I'm just going to do a glaze over the top to add a different color or to tone it down or whatever it is I'm looking to accomplish, well then I'm only going to put 1 coat. If I even put a coat of water down at all, I might just put the color that I've created with water mixed in over the top. So it kind of depends. It's a decision you have to make at the time in a color glaze like that, whether you're going to add just water first and then go in with a small amount of paint, or if you're going to do just the paint and the water mixed in with it. So it depends. Each project is different. It's kind of hard to make that decision unless you're right in the middle of a painting project. Yeah, this will be interesting to see if this is 100% cotton. I guess I didn't realize that until I had already sketched on the designs, and I thought, uh-oh, we'll see. It's a good name brand, though. It's a good product that way, so it should be. And all I'm doing is making sure I get right up to the edge of the design. You want to get all into those little tiny crevices, and then you want to pick up your paper, and I hope you can see that, but I have some areas like right in here that had no water, and right in here there's no water, and for some reason it doesn't want to go to those edges. Okay, so I'm going to just, while I'm holding it up, I'm going to paint those areas just to make sure that that water gets in there. Now there's a couple different tricks too that I want to show you with this. Just trying to get right into those corners there. Okay, so I don't really see, as I tip it up on the side and look at the glare in the light. You want to have a good light. You don't necessarily want it right over your head. Mine is off to the left and it kind of shines in front of me, but it gives me just enough light so I'm not creating a ton of shadows for you folks, but I'm able to see what I'm doing. This is drying really quickly because I got my furnace going. Of course, it's freezing outside and snowing and all those good things. So we'll have to keep that in mind. That's another reason I like that blending and glazing medium. Okay, so I've got this on there. I'm going to let it set up for a minute. It won't be too long because it's drying so quickly. And then I'm going to take another coat, another fresh dip of water, and fill in the center area of that leaf. Any project, any object that you're painting, whether it be a circle or a square, and you might want to just do a whole bunch of squares and circles on your paper and just practice this until you have it down the way you want it. Now, if you would happen to go over, you can just push it back with your finger. If you need a piece of paper towel, push it back this way so it goes towards the project that you're painting. Pick it up that way. If it got fairly wet, let it dry. Just no other answer sometimes. Just let that dry. Dry it with a, see, I can just go like that. Dry it with a hair dryer if you choose to. But if it's too wet on the outside, wherever you put water is where your paint is going to go. So you have to make sure that you keep the glaze inside your object, right up to the edges. I keep going over this because it keeps drying so quickly. But practice this. You cannot get enough practice on doing this and doing it the right way. All right, now I'm going to show you how to fix things if something goes wrong, such as okay, I have a huge puddle of water there, and I think you can probably see it if I lift the paper up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to wipe it, and I'm going to wrap my baby diaper around my brush and pull my brush towards me. Do not go like this into your baby diaper because you will ruin the bristles of your expensive brush. So now your bristles are drier than what's on this paper, and dry it each time in between. And what you're doing is using your brush like a sponge, and it's just picking up that water. So now it looks pretty much just like the rest of it. It's probably a little bit drier actually, but that puddle is gone. If you left that puddle there and you added your color with that puddle of water there, what it does is it lightens that area, and there's just too much water there that the color is not going to be the same here as it is back here. And if you want it that way, that's fine. If you don't want it that way, then you need to pick it up with a dry brush. But it's important to wipe your brush like that and pull it through gently. You don't have to squeeze it or anything like that. Your baby cloth will do exactly what you want it to do. So that's the first item, water glazing. Now let's go into the wet on wet technique. And since we have to do that, I'm going to move my paper. I'm going to grab my palette because it's going to be a green object. Put my water brush down, and I have my mixing brush. So I have a ceramic palette, because if you use a plastic palette, it beads up and you can't quite tell what color you're dealing with. So this is a color that I use on a regular basis, and you might want to write this down as to the directions of how to create this green, gorgeous color. First thing you do is you put down 2 parts. So I put 2 drops of French ultramarine blue, and then 2 parts of Sennelier yellow. And if you're not using Sennelier, just cadmium yellow. And then 1 part of the Phthalo blue. It's a very strong blue, so you want to just do 1 part. And then 2 parts of lemon yellow. Okay, so I have my mixing brush. I'm going to get it wet just to kind of make sure it doesn't have any other colors in it. It does not. So all I'm going to do is mix this. And I'm going to bring these colors down there so we're all in the same area. But this Phthalo blue just gives it the most dynamic, beautiful green. And that is my go-to green right here. Really getting this poor brush full of paint, but that's what it's for. It's our mixing brush. You do not want to do this with a new brush or a good brush, because what you're doing is you're going to ruin it. It's not meant to be used this way, but this brush is. So all I'm going to do is mix that together. And I'm just going to take my water brush here, get it wet, drop some water in it. And I'm going to make a couple puddles over here for different. Water lightens your color, so keep that in mind. So I got some water in here, and it's going to make this is pretty stiff and funky right now, but that's okay. Now I wouldn't want to completely take this brush and dunk it right into my water bucket. You're going to have a really dirty water bucket right off the bat. Well, I want this to be a little darker. So what I'm going to do is take my French ultramarine, add just a dot of it to it. This will make it a little more blue, but it'll make it a little bit darker too, all at the same time. It'll cool it as well. Anytime you darken something, it gets cooler. Anytime you lighten something, it's going to get warmer. All right. So that's why light things come forward and cooler, dark things recede. Yep, that was much better, but I'm going to add some more water to it. It's still pretty thick. There we go. Notice I do have my little painting glove on, so it's important to keep the oils out of my hand, out of the paper, off of the paper. All right, now in order to clean this, first thing I'm going to do is take one of my larger pieces of paper towel here and just wipe off the excess paint. Now I do keep a little jar of this because I use it so often with a cover on it. And I thought about using that, but I thought, no, you really need to see me mix those colors so you can understand. I got paint all over myself, of course, how I create those colors. So I'm going to do that one more time to my brush. And all I'm doing, this is a pretty sturdy brush, so I'm being pretty rough with it. I would never be this way with a brush that I use for painting purposes. But for mixing purposes, that's a pretty sturdy brush. And then I just put it right in my water bucket when I got most of the paint off. Still got green water though, so there must have been a lot of paint left in there. But that's okay. Guess that's what that bucket's for, right? And I'm just wiping it off onto my baby towel, and then I'm going to wipe it on here and double check it. There still is some in there. That's another reason that the paper cloths come in so handy. You might not be able to see it, but there's still some color in there. And there still is, so we'll do that one more time. I'm going to do it in a cleaner bucket here. You don't want that paint to get into your ferrule, because if it does, then it can make the bristles go every which direction that you don't want them to go. But this one is not meant for painting. Oh, good, that's clean. Good, so that one's nice and clean. Now I gotta get my hand nice and clean. Okay, so I'm gonna show you how I create values now. You actually saw me do it a little bit by adding water to the mixture of paint. I got most of it off. So what I'm going to do, use my mixing brush again. I'm going to just grab a little bit of this paint and put it in this spot of water, a little bit in this one, and then in this one. This one I'm going to make a little bit larger because this is going to be our base color. Now I could make this other two darker. I could make them lighter. I think we're just going to have this be our base color. It's a nice pretty green. And I'm going to add some more water to that. And I had a little dropper. Think I can see it anywhere? Of course not. But you can get these little droppers right at the craft store. They pick up water and you can drop however much you want. So we'll use this as our lightest and we'll add the most water here. Now, if this were a really good project and it was going to be something I was going to sell for a commission to a customer, I would be using the blending and glazing medium, because I would not want to take the chance that I wasn't able to blend it the way I wanted to. Add just a little bit of water to this one. See, now that's lighter than this one. This one should be a lot lighter. Needs just a little bit more water to lighten it up some more. Good. That should be good. This one, add a little bit of color back in. Okay, so we got our 3 values to begin with. We've got our dark, our medium, and our lightest. So that's how we're going to start out. We're going to do the wet on wet, and all that means is your color is wet, and when you apply it to your wet paper, that is creating a wet on wet technique. So we're going to go right back and glaze. Now, I hope you're following along with me, because this is a great practice on glazing, and you can learn how to do these other things all at the same time. So we want to get our leaf wet. Got a string in there. We'll get that out of there. Another one. There we go. And again, since this is virgin paper, I am going to want to glaze it twice and lift it up so I can look at the side to make sure that I've got everything covered. I'm right up to the corners. And you can always, once you've gotten your first glaze down and you think you're pretty good, sweep it across and then check the side again and make sure that it's all covered. Not too bad. So we're going to let that set up for just a second, since again it's drying so quickly in my basement here. I'm just going to put some more right in the center, which is what you want to do no matter what object it is that you're painting. Okay. And don't forget, wherever you put the water is where the paint is going to go. So once you learn to control your paint like this, that's one of the biggest steps in painting in watercolors, is learning how to control the amount of water. All I did was put my brush in the clean water just to kind of waken it up. Now, I'm going to just pick up some of this dark. Now, I'm not going to paint right up to the edges or anything. What I'm going to do, and I need some more water in that pile. It's pretty thick. There we go. See, now that's better. I've got a lot more movement. You can see my paint moving. That's what I want. I'm going to go up fairly close to the edge, but not right up to it. Again, wherever I have the water is where it's going to go. Now, once it's had a moment to kind of smush around, we can go up to the edges. Make sure we got it right up to the edges. A lot of little edges in this design, but that's okay. It's good for you to see that. There we go. Now I'm going to clean my brush because I don't want to take that value to the mid value. I want to just pick up the mid value. Now this one's a lot better because it has more water in the paint. So it was easier for my brush to pick it up. It's easier. I'm just going to do thirds, thirds, and thirds right down the middle here. Now that color's a little dark, just like the other value is here. So I'm just adding more water to it right on the paper. And the reason that I want values and 3 different values rather than, I mean, I could have painted this wet on wet right with the same color, but I want you to understand how important values are. This leaf is flat on my paper. I'm just going to pick up the light color. But we want it to look 3-dimensional. And in order to do a 3-dimensional look, or to make a leaf look realistic, you need values, because values are what creates form and what makes this leaf look realistic. So the eye can actually see 12 or even more values in an item. So the more values you can put in your paintings, the more realistic your items are going to look, or your paintings are going to look. Okay, so we've got our 3 values. Let's put this back together here a little bit better. See if I can fix it while it's still wet. And that is one of the things you have to look out for. You don't, let's say this was a brush full of water. If I went back in here, it's going to create a problem. It's going to create a bloom. It's going to push that paint that's on there away from where you just touched your brush with the water. Now this is still wet enough that I can do this. If it were drier, I would not have that capability of fixing that the way I wanted to. I almost didn't have it up here, but it looks pretty good. So that's our wet on wet technique. And I use this, let's say I'm painting a giant rose that's as big as this sheet, and I've got some big petals. I always use this as what I would call an underpainting. It's going to hold my detail on it. It's going to hold any other glazers that I want to add to it, to lighten it, to brighten it, to change the color, whatever I want to do with that glaze. It's going to handle my dry brushing. It's going to hold that up. But this is our underpainting, so it's going to tell you basically where we're going with these colors and why we have the 3 values on there. It's just going to be your underpainting. A lot of old master oil painters would do an underpainting on everything they painted. So if they were painting a red apple, they would create 6, 7, 8 different values of gray and paint that apple in gray first. No detail, nothing like that. But what it does is it gives you where your dark values go, where your darkest values go, where your mid value is, where your highlight is. All of those things are already in there before you add color. Once that was completely dry, that oil gray, then they could add the reds and the yellows and the burnt siennas, whatever they wanted to create that apple. But that was an important part of painting back in the old days. Now again, this is going to be a really good opportunity for you to practice your glazing. What I'm going to do is we're going to glaze this next one, and we're going to put our mid value over the entire leaf, and then I'll show you what we're going to do at that point. This is called lifting. So let's glaze this leaf one more time. Not one more time, this leaf for the first time, but it seems like we're doing the same leaf over and over. So values really are an important item in any painting or any object. Otherwise, you'd be looking at a bowl, for example, a bowl that's got fruit in it, you're painting, and if you didn't have any values, that bowl would be flat. It would be flat like this, like the paper is flat. But as long as you put a dark, let's say it was gray, a dark black over here, and then a lighter black and a lighter black and a lighter black all the way to the mid value, and then the mid value is going to come around on the other side, but then the highlight's going to be in the upper right hand section, and that is what creates form. Now that bowl doesn't just sit flat on the paper, now it's going like this, and that's what you want that bowl to do. So there's a lot of tricks and tips that you can learn along the way on how to create form. And it all depends on your light source. That was the one I just described to you, was an upper right hand light source, which meant the light came from up here and hit that bowl just like it would hit this leaf. This area would be our light source, or our lightest area, I should say, the light source up here. But leaves are a little different because they are almost a cylinder. This is actually wrapping right around a cylinder, if you want to think of it that way, and creating your light values that way. And I'll show you what I mean here. Okay, boy, that's drying really quick. Furnace is running. All right, so I'm just going to sweep over it to make sure I get over all of it. Really need to add some more water here. And by looking at the side of your paper, that you can tell if you need any water or not. So another good practice on glazing. All right, that was our first virgin paper. So we're going to do 2. Since it's drying so quickly, I'm just going to go ahead and add it. Normally, I would wait for this to set up a little bit until the sheen on the paper is gone. But this is drying so quickly, I can't keep it moist enough. And again, I'm looking at the side of my paper so I can see where I need to add. All right. So I am going to pick up our mid value. Oh, it needs water again. Oh, see what I did? Don't do what I say. Don't do what I do. Do what I say. I have my watercolor brush mixed with paint. Don't want to do that. So I'm cleaning it really, really good. And now I'm going to pick up my brush. My painting brush, that's what I want over here. Okay, so now we're going to get this in here. It's got water in there, yay. It's a good thing. That's what we want for this. And I'm kind of filling it in just as I would the belly on the second layer of glazing water on there, because I just want it to go everywhere. I want it to go throughout the entire leaf. If you need to move your paper, move your paper. I know a lot of people say that you shouldn't, baloney, that you shouldn't have to move your paper. Well, if you can't get your hand to where you want it to be, it's not going to help the way the painting is going to turn out. So, see, we got that puddle down there, so I'm going to just pick that puddle up, and I'm going to move it around to where I still need some paint. This puddle over here needs to be moved. And I'm still trying to get some paint up there. Okay. Just trying to get it into the edges of the leaf. See, and I'm just trying to get some of that color in there. Okay. Lot of paint on there that's puddled. So I'm going to just move it out of the way. Too much to move, So I'm just picking it up with my brush. I've just dried on my baby cloth. See how it's picking up that paint? I don't want it. All right, now I want to create a highlight. I've got my light source coming in from over here. So I want this side of my vein to have a highlight. My clean, dry brush is what's picking up that paint. It might be a little wet yet too. I'll have to do it a little bit more. Could have let it dry a little bit more, but that's okay. So it's not going to take it right back to the white of the paper, but it's going to create a highlight for this pretty leaf. All right, so we got the first one in. I do normally like to do more than one. I'm just going to try to fix this edge here a little bit. And this one up here too a little bit. While it's still damp. You don't want any, if you're going back in to fix something like that, make sure your brush is dry. So if you enter any water into it right now, you're going to get that bloom. And you do not want that. Okay, so my brush is dry. Has to be drier than the paper to do this. So make sure your brush is nice and dry. And be kind to your brush as you take that water out. You have to do it each time. Otherwise, you're picking up this color and you're just, if you don't wipe it out in between, you're going to reapply it. So now I want some highlight up here. Don't necessarily want it to go right to the edge of the leaf, but I do want a highlight right there. And that's how you do it. I'm just going to clean my brush. Wipe it out again. So that's called lifting color. And you can do this with any color on the palette. You're going to have some colors that will stain the paper. And this would possibly be like a soft blue or something if you were doing a different color. But sometimes that's okay. Sometimes you just want that lighter value. So be aware of how staining your paints are. It does tell you, there we go, on the tubes. Read your tubes, study your tubes, figure out how to use these. I don't have my I guess I do. I have my magnifying glass here. And this one is translucent. There is a square on here. You probably can't see it, but it's completely clear, that square. So that tells me that that is a translucent color. It's not going to stain. It's not going to be opaque. Translucent is see-through. Opaque is something that is solid. So that's the difference between those two. Now, if that square was colored in halfway, that would be a more opaque color than a square that doesn't have any color in it. So study your paints and see what they say. So that's how you lift color. Now let's go ahead and do charging. Yeah, and then I'll keep my hands out of it. That's a good thing. So the first thing we're going to do, and I'm going to get the correct brush here, make sure I got it nice and clean of color, because I did accidentally put it into color. Looks good. Pick up my clean water. And this will make sense to you once I do it. So I'm not going to even talk you through it. I'm just going to do it and see what you think of it. And then there's a couple different ways to paint the same thing, and that's what you're going to see here. So it's always good to see more than one technique that does the same exact thing, or can do the same exact thing, let's put it that way, because this can be used for other purposes too. Charging. Looking at the side of my paper, making sure it's nice and covered. That looks good. Grab a little bit more water for the next load. Go right up to those edges as best you can. That's the most important thing. Now, if you would go over, clean it up. If it's going to be too dry, let this completely dry before you add any paint, because again, wherever you put that water is where your paint is going to go. None of my paint went outside these petals. It was wherever I had the water, or I should say leaves, was wherever I had the water that paint went. So please keep that in mind as you paint and glaze your projects. Okay, I'm going to put my water brush down, and I'm going to pick up, well, let's see here. We're going to go with the dark value to begin with. This should be good, yeah. I still got a lot of water on the paper, so it's moving, which is a good thing. Okay, I'm going to clean my brush, and I'm going to go to our lightest value. And I'm loading my brush really well, and as I load my brush, and I'm just going to show you so you can understand what I'm talking about. So here's my brush, and here's my light value. I'm loading my brush really well, and I'm going to roll my brush to a point, because I'm going to use the tip of my brush to charge this lighter value in. It's such a close color. Let me do it a different way here once. Just adding a little bit of yellow to my palette that I had sitting there. And I'm just going to roll my brush right into that yellow. Yeah, it's a different value. You can see it now. Hopefully, yep. So I wanted my lighter value up here. So now I am charging or dropping in, however you want to say it, a different value into the area I want it. Just picking up more color. I'm dropping it in down here. And with this still being moist, hopefully, this is going to mingle together. You won't have to blend it or in any way, shape, or form. I am going to, however, pick up a little bit more of the dark and go into the edges. I wanted to do the charging real quick so you could see that. But see how those colors are just intermingling on their own? Now, if you wanted to, or you felt that you needed to, you could pick your paper up and move it around side to side so that these colors will blend together more than what it is right here. Yeah, I can see there's a lot of, see now if you pick that up, it's not going to go outside the leaf, but it should go towards each other a little bit more. Let's do it this way once, see what happens. Yeah, it's starting to come down. I don't have as much moisture on there as I thought. It could have blended a little bit more. But see, we've done basically the same thing. Here we took the paint off of the paper and brought it pretty close to the color of the paper. Here I wanted it to stay more yellow, so I charged in or dropped in that yellow to this one. So that's what charging is. Now let's do the next one, wet on dry. So we're going to have a wet brush full of paint, and we're going to put it on a dry piece of paper. I'm going to move this up so you can see me do this, and I am going to grab another brush. What I'm doing with this extra brush is I'm just getting it wet. Now I don't want any drips on the ferrule, so I'm wiping that off. I'm just going to hold that in my other hand. And now I'm going to pick up our mid value off of our palette. And just turn this one more time because I want you to be able to see this. And I want this edge where I'm applying our paint to be the mid value. But I don't want it to dry in a real harsh line. And watercolors can if you're not careful. And to me, that's one of the nice things about watercolors, that they blend away into a softness. I'm just moving some of my color around. It was pretty wet. Okay, so now I'm going to take this brush, put it in my other hand, and I'm going to pick up my clean, damp brush. I'm going to lay my tip right up to the edge of that paper, or that paint that I had just applied. And I'm going to clean my brush. So Glenn, it's just clean, damp brush. Always have a baby cloth on my lap, so I did wipe it off on my baby cloth before I went back to the paper. So I don't want too much water in here. All right. So you see how dry and harsh that line got down here? So what I'm doing, this one I might have to work at a little bit more than what I did there, but that's okay, because you still can. Brought it down just a little bit too far, so we'll do it that way. Okay, that is the wet on dry. So my paper was dry and I added the wet paint, but I didn't want it to dry harsh like it did over here, so I added in. What I did was I laid my brush down with the point right up against that paint and gave it water for it to blend into, so it would not dry harshly. I'm going to turn this around, and I'm going to do that on this edge. So I'm going to take my brush, that's my paint brush. Let's see which one is which here. Yep, this one's my water. Okay, and this one's my paint. I'm going to the mid value again. And this is wet on dry as I apply this. Now my furnace is running, so you're going to see that line dry really rather quickly. So now I'm going to take my damp brush or wet brush, lay it flat down on the side of the paper, and let the tip touch the edge of that paint so it won't dry in a harsh line. Boy, it's drying really quickly because of my furnace, but that's okay. There we go. Now, if you wanted to, I'm just going to pick up some of the darkest value. I'm going to raise my brush up almost to a 90 degree. Usually like to pull this towards me, but I want you to be able to see it. And if I would have made these thicker, that could have been what we wanted to do with that leaf totally. Of course, you'd want to add in more veins and the stem and all of that goodness. So, okay, we've covered what I wanted to cover today. Next week, we're going to do dry brushing, glazing color, adding details, doing a damp painting, so your paper is damp and you're putting some of your detail on top of it. So that's going to be fun to learn. And you're going to learn how to use an eradicator and what that's good for, all of those good things. So this week was a basic, very basic techniques that we taught you today. Next week will be a little bit more advanced, and that's what you want to do, is you want to go from something that's a little simpler to a little bit more difficult. So practice this week. Create values in your colors. Pick up some of your color and lift those colors out of there to create a highlight. Actually, if this were real nice and dark, that would be even more dynamic there. This was fun because it gave you a different look on how you can do different things with your paintings. If this were a small leaf, that'd be lovely. If you had a big rose and you wanted some smaller leaves down below, or even the sepals, do them this way and leave the center. There's a couple different ways you can make shape. So if you have your center highlighted and it gets darker as it goes to the edge, it's going to make it go this way. And that's exactly what that would do. So lots of different things to think about, lots of fun. And I will see you in 1 week, and then we'll go over some of those more difficult techniques. But in the meantime, draw circles, draw squares, fill up your entire sheet of watercolor paper, but make sure this is 100% cotton, or it would have bled all over and gave me a very difficult time, and it did not. So this has to be 100% cotton, 100% cotton. Thank you so much. Follow me on patreon.com/Colleen D. Aiken, and I'll see you next week. Thank you so much.